Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum has been honored with the award of Best Humanitarian Governor in 2025. Joining us now to share insights on today's World Humanitarian Day is Professor Francis Uriga. His Registrar, CEO, Institute for Humanitarian Studies and Social Development. Thank you for joining us on Newsnight.
It's my pleasure.
I mean, listening to that report by Sumi there, it is obvious that humanitarianism is under attack, like some stakeholders would actually say, globally, and including, of course, Nigeria. With 7.8 million Nigerians, Nigeria's needing humanitarian aid in 2025 alone. But let's talk about the increasing risks faced by humanitarian workers, especially in places like Nigeria. How dire is the situation?
Well, I guess that's actually one of the reasons why the World Humanitarian Day has been devoted to celebrate such individuals and also lend our voices for the need to protect anyone who is committed towards saving other persons' lives. Nigeria is not of exception when you talk about humanitarian catastrophes and security risk for persons who are involved in championing humanitarian cause, particularly humanitarian aid workers. Given the level of insecurity we have in our country, persons who would even want to voluntarily get involved in humanitarian services, particularly in supporting rural communities to get aids and get supported, including those who are affected by floods and those who are also displaced by insurgencies, the internally displaced persons. The security challenge has been the major issue of concern here in Nigeria, even though it's not just only peculiar with Nigeria, but narrowing it down to Nigeria, we haven't actually been proactive. One would recommend that we should embrace the UN human security concept, which talks about a paradigm shift from the traditional security approach, where we only respond when something happens, when there is an attack somewhere. We send troops, we send the military, we send the police, to move into the human security concept, which allows that there should be preventive mechanisms. So as part of the pillars of the United Nations human security concept, it says it has to be preventive, which means we actually know that some of these things will occur. So as a nation, as a government, what are we doing to put preventive measures in place to ensure that people who would like to also support others in terms of disaster don't also risk their own lives, are not also attacked on the way while going to support such communities that have been displaced. And again, the UN human security concept talks about being people's oriented, which implies that it has to be centered on the welfare, the security, the needs of these individuals, no matter where they are found. And then it talks about being holistic, being multidimensional and multi-sectoral. That is to say that it is not just only the responsibility of government. Other sectors can also be involved. And again, taking it further, there are certain elements that are seen as contributing factors to this insecurity. So even if we are trying to approach it from a political point of view, you cannot take away the perspective that deals with the socio-economic factors. So, and socio-economic factors can be linked to SDG Goal 1, where you talk about poverty. Goal 2, where you talk about hunger. So when you have the high level of poverty, you'll always have a high level of insecurity.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. I mean, you make very valid points, but we do not have all the time on the news tonight. Let me quickly ask you on the other side of humanity, which is when you do find yourself in this situation because you haven't taken preventative measures like you have highlighted, How do you then deal with them? In his message to the world today, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that funding is drying up. Today's theme is Act for Humanity. How can Nigeria act for humanity with dwindling resources? How do we do that? Or is it even a problem at all? I mean, you are the professor.
Well, it's a problem because in this part of the world, we pay lip service to a whole lot of things, and we play politics with human lives. Government have certain structures they have established, agencies, both the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, NEMA, and the rest. Some of these agencies that are saddled with these responsibilities have access to funding too from international organizations. Yes, I agree that there is what we now call donors' parsimony and donors' fatigue. Right. A lot of donors are beginning to withdraw. And again, you look at the fact that there are certain reasons also militating against the withdrawal of these donors. When corruption is on the increase, fundings are released, it does not get to the right persons. It is not applied for the purpose for which the funding was released. And so you begin to find donors withdrawing because they are not actually getting value for the money they are putting. But that also throws a challenge to us as a people and to us as a government. Government should be able to wake up to that task and that responsibility because, of course, it is said in the Constitution that the primary responsibility of government shall be the welfare and the protection of lives and properties of the people. So how well have government been able to galvanize resources and even strengthen the capacities of local actors who are found in rural communities, including the NGOs and the CSOs, to be able to, in those days we used to have subventions, government subventions given to NGOs to do interventions. But today, you no longer find that. So you now find a lot of non-governmental organizations going into comatose. A lot of them are incognito and incommunicado because the fundings are not available for them to do their intervention. So I think government hasn't actually done enough when it comes to the way and manner it galvanizes resources for humanitarian response.
And like you said earlier, I mean, government alone really cannot do it. So how should communities, how can communities, individuals, corporate organizations help in closing the humanitarian financing gap? What needs to be done urgently? And I mean, I'm looking at figures in front of me. 31 million people are food insecure. In Nigeria, 10 million children under 5 severely malnourished. 3.5 million severely malnourished. I mean, it is a huge task. So how can you close this funding gap and the aid gap, of course?
Certainly. We have, unfortunately, in this part of the world, we do not have so much philanthropists who are committed in sincerity to the cause of funding when it comes to humanitarian interventions. We have more of political philanthropists who during electionary campaign comes to the street, you know, to just do some level of razzmatazz, you know, patronize the woman in selling bolly, you know, on the road and give money and all of that, and go to their constituencies and do some window dressing, you know, of problems, giving 15 cups of rice and wrapper and the rest. Who says to you that that is actually their needs? Yeah. So for us to close the rank, we must be able to set up, even in different states, we should be able to set up, you know, a broader stakeholders engagement that will involve good-spirited individuals, even in the diaspora, who are willing to contribute. You know, we can set up like an emergency humanitarian intervention fund and bring in NGOs, you know, that can access this grant. Of course, I give credence to some organizations, indigenous foundations such as the T.Y. Danjuma Foundation, but we do not have a lot of them, unfortunately, in this part of the world. Okay. But again, the private-public participation can also increase if well governed and if well harnessed.
Indeed, like we saw Kakovi during COVID. Professor, let me ask you very quickly. We do have a ministry dedicated to humanitarian affairs and poverty reduction, but it does seem like we have not been lucky with the heads of that ministry. I mean, they are embroiled in allegations of misappropriations. You have the Professor of Humanitarian Studies. Just last week, the WTO DG, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, talked about Nigeria's economy stabilizing and that the next step is for safety nets to be established to grow the economy by the government. What is your professional advice to the government regarding the humanitarian ministry? How do we get it right, particularly when it comes to safety nets?
You see, in 2017, we had the annual humanitarian public lecture where we came up with a communique and advocated that government should create Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and it should be an annex in the office of the president or vice president, so that you remove bureaucratic bottleneck from it and take away politics from it. You know, now creating Ministry for Humanitarian Affairs, because as at that time, the pioneer minister, Sadia Umar, was a federal commissioner in the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons.
Yes.
Before we inducted as a humanitarian fellow. And now creating it as a ministry for humanitarian affairs hasn't actually given that needed result that Nigerians have been yearning for. It was all welcome development. Today we get a lot of calls from NGOs who feels that we have been on ground and we should lend a voice to this, that government have not actually played the role that they should play by involving these NGOs that can support them in designing programs holistically that can even attract donors. Because if you don't approach it, you know, using the global best practice, and you are making it all politics, you will not get the result. And
absolutely, and that's a good place to leave it. Professor Francis Origa, I mean, we could give you all night. So many important points that you raised there. Thank you so much for your work. Professor Origa is a registrar, CEO, Institute for Humanitarian Studies and Social Development. Thank you for joining us on Newsnight.